Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome. My name is Kevin Schutte. I am Executive Director at the Mason County Economic Development Council, and we're proud to be able to host this event today here at the Civic Center to help everybody become more aware of their surroundings and be able to protect themselves against threats that you might not be expecting. So being prepared is one way to be able to prevent things that you don't want happening from happening, right? And so we're very fortunate today to have with us Sheriff Ryan Sperling from the Mason County Sheriff's Office and Captain Dan Patton here from the Shelton City Police Department. And so they have a wonderful lesson to walk everybody through here, and I'm sure they're going to be able to help answer any questions about safety in your home or office that you might have as well throughout. So with that, I'm happy to turn it over to Sheriff Sperling and Captain Patton. Thank you so much.
First of all, thank you for showing up. This is absolutely amazing. I was telling the sheriff, just to have this many people on a midweek at 3 o'clock really shows the interest that you have in your community and the interest that you have, the safety of your community. So thank you for showing up. The lesson plan that Sheriff Sperling is going to go through today is probably the same lesson plan that I give to my own kids. I got 2 kids that go to school in a different county, and we go over this with them, what to do if you're at school and something like this were to happen. So it's really good information, and once again, you're here to listen to it, and hopefully you can share this with your neighbors and your coworkers and your friends that aren't here today. And if we can just get this information out to everyone, I believe that's going to put us in a really great position as a community to protect ourselves when that day comes, not if. So, Sheriff?
All right. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here. I have a tendency to wander around a little bit, so bear with me. First off, you guys got the notice, whether it be through social media or somebody told you. But before I even begin the class, I'd like to hear, what are your expectations? What would you like to walk away with from this class? I've got 37 years in law enforcement, 22 in the military. He's got how many?
20-something.
20-some. I've carried a gun my whole life in my profession. So what do you guys want? We know the kind of the class that we want to teach. We want to make sure we address what the community wants as well. So if we have somebody that's a good writer, we'll write them down. It's because it's not me. Is somebody a good writer want to write down the expectations on the whiteboard? Are you going to do it?
If no one else.
Oh, there you go. Somebody's a good speller. See, if I did it, you wouldn't even read it.
I'm a good speller. You guys can use big words and everything.
Thank you. All right, somebody had their hand up. Where was it? Yes, sir.
My wife was a little hesitant to come today because she was concerned you were going to teach her how to physically take down an assailant. That bothered her. I was concerned about it because if she did learn that, she might use it on me.
Well, I can tell you, I've been in martial arts since I was 10. I've taught martial arts for 30 years. I was the lead defensive tactics instructor at the State Patrol Academy. I'm not going to teach you how to defend yourself in 2 hours. That's just the reality. It takes a long time, so we're not going to teach any of the physical stuff that, like that. So no worries. Yes, sir. Hang on just a second.
I was hesitant to come because I thought you were going to tell us to run.
But what would you like to walk away with from here? What information? Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I would like to, I have no idea, for instance, if I found myself like someplace like a shopping mall or something.
Okay, if you're in an active threat situation.
What would I heard shot somewhere, what should I do? I don't really know other than duck and run or something. I don't know what else would be a safe thing to do.
Okay, so what to do if you're caught in an active threat situation. So we will definitely cover that. Yes, sir.
I'd like to learn more what my rights are as far as protecting my property.
Okay, we can hit the rights, Washington State, and what you're allowed to do as far as protection. We're not a castle doctrine state, but we can cover that as well. Yes, sir.
So if we're face-to-face with someone who's upset or becoming an active threat, what are some immediate verbal and or other
Perfect. Okay, we will cover that. So de-escalation tactics or verbal, what in law enforcement oftentimes we call it verbal judo, because that comes from a book back in the 90s that Dr. Thompson put together, and we'll talk a little bit about that. Good. Way in the back, yes sir.
Maybe the top 2 or 3 things you've experienced in interactions that we should not do or we should avoid.
I will give some not do's. Yes, thank you, Aaron. I appreciate that, because there's definitely learned experiences here. Yes, sir.
Why, as a gun owner in the state of Washington with my concealed weapons permit, am I not able to buy insurance in the state of Washington?
You're not able to buy. I can't answer that one.
Can't buy carry insurance here.
Oh, carry insurance. I'm sure. Is it not within Washington State? Because
It's
I've heard.
illegal in Washington State for them to sell insurance to you. You can join an association that will provide you.
I've not looked for that. Yeah.
Coming from the Grapeview town meeting, I went home and started doing some research on that, and was going, well, why can't I cover myself?
An umbrella policy wouldn't do it?
I do.
It's questionable is what you're saying.
I'm looking at the policy that I was looking at provides you with a lawyer, provides you with coverage for exercising your Second Amendment rights.
Yeah, I don't know.
In your own domicile.
I don't know that I can answer that one, but research a minute. Yes, sir.
Just basically attack or flee.
Attack or flee, okay? And what are the strategies?
Yeah.
Yeah, we will talk about that. Yes, ma'am.
I want to know what you think are the highest threats we have.
Okay. What do we or law enforcement think are the highest threats that we have, or the most dangerous? Okay.
Or the most likely.
Most likely, okay. Who else? Anybody else like to walk away with something specific so that we can make sure we address these? Yes, ma'am.
I'm not sure what he was talking about, the insurance, but if you do are licensed for carrying, do you get involved?
That's a great question.
Not to get involved.
At what point should you
If you're
get involved
trained-
if you are carrying a firearm?
Yeah, if you're trained, should you get involved?
Well, after today's class, you're going to have a little different perspective on some of that, or at least some things to think about in that area. Level of involvement, if you have a concealed carry, you're doing a great job. Look at her.
Beautiful.
Yeah, we're going to need a bigger board. Anybody else? We got a room for 1 or 2 more. Yes, ma'am.
What weapons, as a person that doesn't carry a gun, what can we use against somebody attacking us?
Perfect. I love that question. What do you, or what weapons to carry or to use?
That is legal, you know, to use.
Right. So you don't want to bring your bazooka, probably. It's a semi-automatic bazooka. Okay. Room for 1 more. Any other questions or things that you would like us to address while we're here? And as we get towards the end, we're going to go back and make sure that we hit the ones that we can answer. Obviously, we're not going to make up answers if we don't know it. But it's interesting, what you're giving, we already have almost all of it included in the outline. Yes?
I think everybody that carries a concealed or has a concealed weapons permit probably knows the answer, but it wouldn't hurt to go over home handling of your firearms, storage.
Okay. Storage with the new laws, that type of thing, how to address that. Okay, that's a good one. Yes, Mary?
Quick one. We already had a little experience here a while back with the active shooter squad calls, as they call it. And we had a lot of parents running to the school.
Oh, you're
So
talking
maybe-
about a swatting event up at the school.
Well, let's say there's an active shooter. What should parents do? Should we run
That's
to
a
the
great one, because those, in the last 2 that we've had, one at the Shelton High School, and then in 2017 we had one. We actually all thought it was an active shooter up at Hawkins Middle School, and the whole community was overwhelmed by parents trying to come to the school to pick up their kids. And it was a mess. And we still didn't know who the threat was in the school, and we had to search every kid, and it took 3 hours or so to even clear everything and search all the kids. And you got all the parents threatening to break in and get their kids out because they're in a panic. So yeah, that's major stuff. Good question. Handling, do we have parents involved? Just write parents off to the side. There we go. I think that's enough.
Yeah.
What time do we want to get out of here? Well, got an hour and 45 minutes. We'll probably take a break at some point. Any of those you particularly want to go over?
I can go over any one.
Whatever you want. We'll hit them again in the class.
You want to do that one?
Sure.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
What's number 1? What to do if caught in a store. So, this is going to sound very basic, right? Anytime my family were in a store, a school, a theater, no matter where, pay attention to where you're at and where all your exits are. Even the exits that say employees only, associates only. Several years ago, we had a case here in Shelton where there was a man that was planning to let off a huge explosion at Walmart.
I was up on that one.
Luckily, our federal partners were involved in it and were able to deter it from happening. But here's my point. Even Shelton, something like that can happen. Even Shelton. This is not just Olympia or Seattle. My son just turned 16. He got a driver's license. One of the things I teach him is when he's driving down the highway, a 2-lane highway, I said, I want you to envision a car coming into your lane. It may never happen, but what are you going to do if that car right there, that white Honda, if it came right in your lane head on, what would you do? Because you got to think about it now, because if you wait for when it happens, it's already too late. So have a plan. Same thing. You know, I want you to enjoy your lives. I don't want you to be scared. But think about this. When you go to Walmart, when you go to Safeway, already have that in your mind. What are you going to do if there's an explosion, if there's someone with a gun? For the schools down in another county where my kids go and I talk to the schools, same kind of concept here. Number 1 is if you can run and get out of there, a lot of this sounds like common sense. We want you to run. Get away from the threat. If you can run, get away. There's going to be times that you can't run. We had this discussion with our city employees here. A lot of them are in these offices. There may be only one exit for them. They might not be able to escape. So if you can't escape, the very next thing is, we teach people, go ahead and just hide. Do your best to hide. Make yourself as small as possible. And then we're going to go into much more depth. The sheriff's going to go much more in depth about how our brain processes stuff. And then lastly, if you can't run and you can't hide and you're underneath a desk or in the bathroom hiding at Walmart, and that person comes in there, it's time to fight. And you have to fight like you're the third animal getting on Noah's Ark and it's starting to rain. So, and that's using anything you possibly have. Number 2? Oh, going through?
Up to you. We can. We're going to hit them again. We'll hit them both. Some of them are embedded into the outline, but it's perfect. I love it.
I'll let the sheriff go a little bit more into the rights. But real quickly, de-escalation tactics. Like the sheriff said, he has many years of talking to people. I have many years of talking to people. And it's no different how you talk to people as opposed to how I talk to people. And some people just have the gift of talking people into doing whatever they want them to do. Whatever level you come at with the tone is going to be mirrored by by the subject you're talking to. I think you have to really realize is, is this person in crisis? Are they like mentally ill? Are they paranoid? Are they seeing things that aren't there? Because then talking to them might just be buying you time. But we train all of our officers. You can talk someone out of a car and into a pair of handcuffs. If you're in a safe place, you might be able to even talk someone to, maybe it's not a gun threat, maybe it's some other type of threat. You might be able to talk them down if you have no other opportunity to escape. I have the insurance, that's the first I've heard about this. So my thought too was just an umbrella policy for your homeowner's insurance. The fight or flee. Flee if you can. Don't stick around for a fight. If you can flee, flee. The sheriff has a lot of information on the most likely threats. We both go to a twice a year update by the FBI on what our threats are here in the Northwest and what we're seeing. And they don't really change a whole lot. But we are seeing some minor changes, and the sheriff has some good information on that, so I really don't want to take that bubble away from you. Level of involvement. It's all about your comfort. Your comfort. I did a security talk for a church one time. My biggest concern was not so much who may come to the church and shoot. It was how many people in the congregation come to church with guns that have never trained with that gun. That's what honestly scares me. So your level of involvement should meet what your level of comfort is and training is in that involvement. So the last thing you want to do is be in a crowded place and you have a concealed weapon and there's an active shooter and you shoot an innocent person. So right where your level of comfort is. Again, what do you protect yourself with? Some people have concealed weapons permits, right? Guns, some people carry pepper spray. Once again, that's a level of comfort for you and a decision that you need to make yourself. I know a lot of people, they're terrified of guns. At my house, if I come home and I leave my gun someplace I shouldn't, my wife won't even touch it. She doesn't like guns. She's scared of guns. She won't even touch it. So what's your level of comfort with whatever you choose to defend yourself? And then just the handling of firearms. If you're going to have a firearm in your house, educate your entire family. Educate them the dangers of it, what they're comfortable doing with it. But not only that, be aware of who's coming to your house. Lock up your guns. Lock them up. This day and age, there's really no reason to. If you want quick access to your gun, there's tons of safes out there now that you can have a split-second access to your firearm. So there's really no reason why your firearm shouldn't be locked up. So I hit most of them. We'll just let the sheriff start.
Well, I know he's got a search warrant that he's already wrote and got to get back to because of the thing, so
I'll get back in. So anyways, thank you. I'm going to let the sheriff take over now.
Well, thank you. Appreciate it. All right. One thing I want to establish. There's a difference between being prepared and being paranoid. I'm going to give you some information today that I don't want you to use that's going to make you paranoid, because that doesn't enhance your life or your safety. But being prepared is understanding what it is that we're facing, understanding what it is we're up against. Just this last weekend, there were 3 shootings in Seattle with 1 dead, just last weekend. There was a shooting in Los Angeles where 5 people were injured. In Trenton, New Jersey, 3 people were shot in an incident. In Plymouth, 5 young girls were stabbed in a theater. Just this last weekend, we had a shooting where we're still investigating, where multiple rounds were shot at one of our deputies at the Pickering parking lot. So that's just 1 weekend. So is there a need for this? Is there an interest in our society to learn how to defend themselves? Well, to give you a little background for me, when I got out of high school, I went straight into the Marine Corps. And after 4 years of active duty in the Marine Corps, I got out, joined the State Patrol and the Army Reserves at the same time. So those were dual tracks. And in the Army, I was a drill sergeant, and I ran opposition force units, which we were the unit that would come and test active duty military to see if they were prepared for combat and battle. So we would attack them, and we had to use unconventional methods. We had to study the enemies, how the enemies of the United States actually attacked, what their tactics were, and that's what we used. Then worked Snoqualmie Pass as a trooper for 10 years, all through the 90s, when all of the gangs were coming up from Los Angeles. The Bloods and the Crips were coming up, and we had a lot of drug activity going between Seattle and Yakima specifically. And we had a very, very big involvement with the Mexican Mafia down in Yakima, and a lot of the drug activity going on. I was working on the pass, and I would stop a car where they would outman me and outgun me. So this is what you had to get good at, and this, because there was no way I could defeat them. So that's some of the history. Then I ended up going to the State Patrol Academy, and they sent me all over the place, learning how the brain works and how to train people to survive. And the training I'm going to give you today, over the years, has been reserved for law enforcement and military. This training really wasn't something that was given out to civilians necessarily, because, again, it might cause paranoia and it might cause other things, and that wasn't the point. But as our society changes and we're seeing some of these things increase, it's becoming more and more necessary that everybody be involved. Washington State, 13 years in a row, has the lowest number of officers per 1,000 citizens of any state in the United States. 13 years in a row. We would have to hire 1,000 officers to be tied for last. The average in the United States is 2.3 officers per 1,000 citizens. Washington State's average is 1.3 officers per 1,000 citizens. Mason County, we're at about 0.8 officers per 1,000 citizens. So how much can we really do? We've got 1,000 square miles. We're running anywhere from 60 to 200 calls for service a day over those 1,000 square miles. Are we going to be there really quick every single time? No, so we need our citizens to know how to defend themselves, to know how to, and many of you are former military. You've got some training, you've got some experience. Many of you had training in different environments. But we want to make sure that you know what it is that we're facing. And again, it's not about paranoia, it's not about scaring you, it's about helping you to get prepared. Washington State, we've made quite a few firsts. Washington State is #1 in the United States right now for robberies. New Mexico's second, but we're #1. We had the most robberies in 2023 of any state in the United States. Robberies. Just a robbery. It can be at a store. That means not a burglary where it's a crime against property, but a robbery is a crime against person with force. Okay, so there's a scope of that. We also, just on the side note, not necessarily to do with this, but last year we had over 800 fatality collisions in Washington State. It's the highest we've had in 33 years. We have the highest number of fatalities from motorcycle crashes that we've ever recorded in Washington State history. People are driving very poorly. There's more drug use in driving and alcohol and driving than we've seen in years past. State Patrol, if you've been paying attention, they just arrested, I think, their 4,000 DUI this year already. That's their job, is keeping the roadways safe. We honestly don't have enough people to work traffic very much right now because we're going from call to call for crimes against persons, and we don't have the extra resources to work traffic. In Mason County, we've had the highest number of fatalities we've had in many, many years, as you guys have seen. just look along 101 and other places. But you also see the State Patrol taking action about that. We should have seen a lot more troopers out there lately than we've had in the past. And I talked with their captain, J.J. Gunnerman, who's in charge of the entire peninsula, and they are getting after it more than they have. So hopefully that will start to come down. That's their primary job. Another thing I want to cover, and again, I want to preface this, I'm not painting a dire picture, but I just want to share information with you. I'm elected by the community, and I have an obligation to share information. I went down in March, down to what's called the Western States Sheriff's Association meeting, and there were over 1,100 sheriffs represented down there from 18 states. So it's everything west of the Mississippi. And we had the Assistant Chief of the United States Border Patrol come and brief us on what's going on the border. Now, I haven't got too engaged in following what's going on in the border, and I don't tend to go one way or the other because I know there's a lot of rhetoric out there. There's a lot of information, but until I know it from a trusted source, I question it. That's just being a cop. That's part of the deal. But when I have the Assistant Chief of the U.S. Border Patrol and the Chief of every region of the border along the southern border and Blaine, our portion of border up here, tell us what's going on, it rather concerned me. We thought we might have PowerPoint, but we don't. So I'm just going to have to show you my graph here. Can you see this? The graph? You can't tell there's colors there. Oh, that's what's a bummer. You can't tell the difference. But the graph is from the U.S. Border Patrol. It shows from 2001 through 2016 the change on people that are coming illegally over the borders. And the big change is from 2001 through 2016, many of them were families from Mexican nationals that were coming across the border looking for a better life, coming across to escape one thing or another. But then you see a distinct difference in the last 4 years. The colors change. From blue being Mexican nationals to orange being other than Mexican. And what the chiefs told us was in the last 4 years there's been approximately 10 million people that have come across the border into the United States. And they're no longer families. They are young men from all over the world coming by themselves into our country. Right after I'd gotten that training, I listened to Mr. Ray, the director of the FBI, brief the Senate in Washington, D.C. He said over the past 3 years, a record number of terrorists and suspects have been detected sneaking across the southern border. But Mr. Ray, prodded by the GOP senator, said that the scariest issue is how many have made it undetected and not properly vetted. Terrorists in our country, right now. How many terrorists did it take to cause some serious havoc in Moscow? There's 5 of them, right? How many did they kill? And we're not going to necessarily be right there to respond as fast as you would like. So that's why it's important that our communities now start to get involved in this. Does that make sense? This is why we're providing this training. It's because we may or may not be able to respond as quick as we need to. We've got the tools that we need to help. We just had a SWAT call that worked out really well. The individual turned himself in after shooting the rounds. We're still undetermined whether he was shooting directly in the sky or shooting at our officer, but we ended up getting the individual in custody. Part of it is because we have tools that discourage aggression and that de-escalate because of the superior firepower in numbers. Right? When you show up with this big armored vehicle that we have, with cameras that shoot out a mile, and all the weapons and dogs and everything else, they go, oh. And they're much more likely to surrender, and it actually de-escalates the situation when you show up with full force. And it makes it less dangerous to our community. I know a lot of people have said, well, you're militarizing law enforcement. It's just that it's the best tactics and equipment. That's what it is, and we're still the number of law enforcement compared to citizens, we have to have the best tactics and equipment to be able to be successful. So there really is no easy thing to deal with as far as how do I deal with a life-threatening situation. What if I was in that theater where the 5 young girls were stabbed? How am I going to deal with that? You know, it's not always guns. If somebody's determined to hurt other people, they can use a vehicle, they can use knives, they can use lots of different things. If somebody's bent on hurting people, the big thing too is, what are the citizens around prepared to do? Our society has trained people that are not law enforcement to not do anything. Do you realize that? You've abdicated your authority that used to be throughout the United States when there was one sheriff in the county, right? And maybe a deputy, where people protected themselves. But now we expect somebody else to do it. So that's why it's important for you to get to know it. Now let's talk a little bit about the brain. I had to do a lot of research in law enforcement to figure out how to train officers. They really don't know fully, they're guessing, but I've had a lot of good trainers teach what happens in the brain in crisis. Some of you have heard me say this before, but approximately what they believe is 80% of the population loses the ability to access the frontal lobe of your brain if you're in a life-threatening situation. I'm going to say that again. They believe that 80% of the population loses the ability to access the frontal lobe where we make decisions and we do cognitive thought process. You don't even have access to that brain. 80% of the population doesn't have access. So what does that mean? That means that if there were 100 people on the 10th floor of a building and it was on fire, and you really believed you were going to die, 80 out of the 100 would die pushing the elevator button. Because your ability to think and make a cognitive, informed decision is cut off to you and you're operating in a different part of your brain. Now, how do we know if you're the 80% or the 20%? Well, if you've been in crisis, you probably know a little bit about that. Let me give you an example. The psychologist who taught me this back in 2000, her name is Alexis Hartwell. She wrote a book called Deadly Encounters in Law Enforcement. She was a police psychologist in Portland when police psychology first got introduced, and she worked with a lot of the top psychologists. And she practiced down in Portland. Besides being a police psychologist, she practiced in the city. And she had a lady come to her. And the lady woke up on a Sunday morning, very quiet, very demure, very passive, woke up on a Sunday morning and somebody had broken into her apartment and was standing at the foot of her bed about to attack her. Okay, I'll get back to that story. So go. Cliffhanger. Are you still engaged? It's a real story. So, what happens to the brain? I get into a crisis. If I don't have access to the frontal lobe, what they believe occurs is I go to what's called the reptilian core, a different portion of the brain, and I go by what previous experiences I have stored in my brain. So it's like your brain is asking, what do I do, what do I do, what do I do, what do I do? It's going through the card file. And if you've ever had your life flash before your eyes, that's what they believe is occurring. Now, if I have something, like in schools, we practice fire drills. You're putting it in a different portion of the brain when the kids actually walk out a fire drill or an active shooter drill. You're storing that, and then if you can't access the cognitive portion of your brain searches if it has a reference, and then it just pushes play to that program. And you do what you were trained to do. Now, if anybody's been military law enforcement, you were trained something, and you've had a crisis happen, and you went, whoa, I didn't even know what I did. That's what is occurring there. Your brain is just pushing play on a program that's stored on your hard drive. Now, if you don't have a reference, and it asks, what do I do, what do I do, what do I do, and then you get the blue screen of death, right? There's no reference. That's when they believe you go to fight, flight, or freeze. Guess what, though? Fight, flight, or freeze study was done just on men. Women, they know now, do not respond with fight, flight, or freeze. And yes, men and women's brains are different. The corpus callosum, the portion that connects the right and left hemisphere, is much thicker in a woman. That's why they're allowed to be in multiple portions of their brain at the same time, whereas men have a very thin corpus callosum between the hemispheres, and they can operate really sometimes only in one portion of their brain. Oh, it all makes sense now. Right? That's just extra. I just threw that out there extra. Women, we've always known this, but now research confirms it. They respond with gather and protect. Mother bear, oh yeah. Gather and protect. So now I told you that part, I'm going to go back to the cliffhanger. The lady comes to Alexis Hartwell, the psychologist, and says, when I woke up and I saw that guy at the end of my bed, I don't know what happened to me. I went absolutely wild. I started screaming, hissing, clawing. I went after him like I was a caged animal. And like many people who will prey on that type of a person, was a coward, and he turned tail when he met a predator, and he ran out of the apartment. She was not attacked. But she went to the psychologist because she was afraid of her reaction. She's like, am I possessed? Why? That's so counter to who I am. Why did I respond that way? Come to find out, 10 years prior, she'd gone to a junior college course on survival, women's survival. And the instructor had them visualize and act out violent, gross motor, aggressive behavior if they were attacked. What is gross motor skills? Big muscle groups, right? Fine motor, something you can't do when your hands are cold. Right? It takes that fine motor. You don't have fine motor when your adrenaline's going real big. I mean, you think about it. How many of you ever played an instrument? Think about a little 10-year-old right before they go out on the piano recital. Right? Fine motor skill, piano recital. Do I go up to it and go, oh yeah, here we go, let's go get him? What are they going to do? Because their adrenaline rises up, their ability to do fine motor skills go down. So when you're under stress, you have to use gross motor skills. Think of the football player, the weightlifter, the wrestler, gross, big movement. They use adrenaline to their advantage. So if you're going to train to respond, you want to use gross motor responses, not fine motor responses. That's why in martial arts, when you're trying all these fancy, cool techniques, unless you've done them for years and years and years and years, and they're such a part of you, you're not going to be able to pull it off under stress. So you got to stick to the gross motor responses. She responded with gross motor responses because that's what the instructor taught her to do. What did her brain do when she woke up? She's about to be assaulted. She's by herself. She's freaked out. Her brain looks for a reference, found 10 years prior, and pushed play, and she did exactly without any cognitive involvement at all, didn't even think about it, she just did what she was trained to do. It prevented her from being assaulted. With that in mind, that's what the captain was talking about when you go into a building, when you go into any facility, have a plan in place. And research has shown that visualization is almost as good as physically doing the activity. Have you ever seen the Olympics? Think of the divers and the gymnasts. What do they do before they go out and perform their routine or their dive? You see them in the back. Right? They're visualizing it, and that trains your subconscious as well. Again, this is not paranoia. I don't want you to go in every building paranoid. But I want you to go in and say, as Captain said, where are the exits? Where's the fire extinguisher? What tools do I have? Okay, now I can enjoy myself and relax. The other thing I really want to emphasize for you guys is become a studier of human behavior. Our bank people are here, and I've used this example with them. How do they know when a counterfeit bill comes into their hands? It's because they've handled real dollar bills so much that the moment a counterfeit bill comes into their hands, they recognize the feeling or the difference. If you study people, and we're now actually training officers to do this, I know the malls aren't quite as big as they used to be, but go to crowded areas and just watch people. Why is it important? Well, I can tell you, one of the pieces of training that I had was, and I know many of you are too young to remember this, but when Ronald Reagan was shot, remember back when Ronald Reagan was shot, the Secret Service had a huge blow-up picture of the crowd. And they said, "Where's Waldo? Where's the shooter? Can you find the shooter?" This is just minutes before Ronald Reagan was shot. And every one of us went, "Oh God, he's right there." Why? Why were we able to pick out the shooter that shot the president during a significant event? What do you think we saw in the picture as trained law enforcement?
I would say different behavior than everybody else around them. People exhibit certain behaviors when they're not good intentions.
What do you think people would normally look like if they got the president coming by? I mean, Ronald Reagan was really, really revered, especially during that time frame. Excitement, fun, how were they dressed? Appropriately, pretty consistently across, and you got all these people that are excited, they're talking to people, they're involved, and you got a dude in it like almost a trench coat. Mean muggy. Deadpan, 1,000-yard stare, and you can actually pick them up. Why do I emphasize that? Because if you become a studier of human behavior, and you pay attention to how people act, whether they're drunk or whether they're not, whether they're high, whether they're not, whether there's mental illness or whether there's not, you're going to be able to better predict things that are going to possibly happen. And when something makes you go, "Oh, my hackles are on edge," I want to tell you, your brain is picking things up you don't even realize, and you need to pay attention to that. As long as it's not paranoia. Because paranoia will see everything as a danger, right? I got horses, and horses think that every stump and every tree is a monster, so I'm here, right? That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about when you are paying attention, something, as you're scanning the crowd, and something stands out to you of, "Oh my goodness, I better pay attention to this, or I need to go the other way." Pay attention to those feelings. Yes, ma'am?
That's also important in parking lots.
What? Absolutely.
What did she say?
She said, especially in parking lots. So you're coming out of a store and there's somebody possibly parked next to you and there's somebody in it and there's nobody else in the parking lot. Don't just push through that. If you feel it's hinky, pay attention to it. Go back into the store and say, "I'd like you to walk me to my car." So now there's at least two of you, right? One big thing, it's interesting, I've taught a lot of women's self-defense. One of the big questions I almost always get is, what do I do if somebody's in the back seat of the car after I get in? And I was like, wow, I would have never thought of that, but I've gotten that question probably 10 times over the years. Yeah, it's an old movie tactic, yeah, it's scary. But check your car before you get in.
Right.
Walk around it.
Not to mention the other board right there too.
Where are your keys when you come out of the, are you busy with kids or in the purse and groceries? Or do you have keys ready to go? What are you carrying in your hand? How many of you carry a big metal water bottle? Now here's the thing. If you've never rehearsed it in your mind and you get into a crisis and your brain asks, what do I do, and you've never rehearsed it, it's not available to you. It'll be right in your hand and you won't do anything with it. Yes?
I'm also talking about when you get out of your car and go in the store, just sit there and watch what
Ah,
you're doing.
yeah, absolutely.
Because there's been so much car theft.
Well, and be aware, right now, especially down in California, your key fobs, don't lock your cars with your key fobs in the parking lot. Because there's a device that they can be sitting next to your car. They can pick that signal up and duplicate it and steal your car, especially if it's a push-button car. It's happening in California. Yeah. It's happening in California. It's coming this way as well. There's devices that will clone that signal. So lock it with the door lock. Don't use your fob when you're locking it. They still may be able to pick up the signal, but it's a little less likely. Yes?
Parking lots are kind of a threat area. And I started thinking about a year ago about parking lots anywhere. I always scan. Are there cars with people just sitting in them? Now
And why?
And why? And so now when I park in a parking lot, I think defensively when I park, when I get out. It's the world we live in.
So paying attention to what's going on around you, know what normal is. What I've had my officers do is we'll take a fake gun and they'll put it in their waistline. And I make them sit down, stand up, run, jog. Why do I have officers do that? Exactly. What are the body mechanics when somebody is sitting down? And here, oddly enough, I think it's because it's cool, most people that are carrying a gun not in a holster are the ones that are going to use it against somebody. And I don't know why it's not cool to wear a holster, but they often don't wear a holster. So if it's in my waistline here, or if it's in my waistline there, what has to happen when I stand or if I run? I got to adjust it. And I make the officers watch what does it look like, so when we make a stop and somebody comes out of a car and they make this certain adjustment, you go, oh, I recognize that adjustment. I know what that is. Or if they start running and they're running like this, that's what we call a clue in law enforcement. Right? They are securing something. The other thing is the subconscious will check for the weapon over and over again if they're not used to carrying it. They'll subconsciously check to make sure it's not visible or seen. So the motions and the mechanics. So again, watch what normal looks like. And then if abnormal happens, it'll jump out at you. Not being paranoid, but handle the real bills like a banker so that when the counterfeit bills come through, you'll recognize them. Now I'm also going to cover two different types of aggression. There's predatory aggression and effective aggression. Effective aggression, you get to see it happen. That's the emotional buildup and the anger and the adrenaline of somebody that's going to attack you. Effective aggression is very easy to see. You start getting the nostril flare. If I draw what is the dominant handed side in the population? Right-handed. 80% of the population is right-handed. So where do you think most of the guns are carried? 80% of the people who carry a handgun is going to carry on the right side. Where do you think their knife is? On the right side. How many people are carrying knives like this nowadays? A lot of people. Just take a look. It's kind of popular. It's a fashion statement anymore. Right? So where do they carry it? Why do I carry mine on my left? Because I've always got a gun on my left. And if somebody's attacking my gun, I can get my knife and use it to defend my gun. Right? If it was in this pocket, I couldn't get it. So think about those things. Watch people, right side, mechanics, elbows. If there's under their shirt, what's going to happen first? The shirt has to come up. And then what's going to happen? This. And this is usually not a wallet. If you see this motion and this motion, you're usually in trouble. And you don't have a lot of time to react. So even if you have a weapon, I teach our officers, if somebody's ambushing you this way, don't try to get your gun because you'll be shot before you do it. You have to attack them, even without the gun. Whatever it is, because I have to stop that mechanic because I'm behind the curb. They initiated the action and I'm in the reactive state. Okay, so those are things to look for. again, body mechanics. What are they doing? How are they doing? I want to make sure I'm paying attention to what's going on. I've had that feeling where the hair on the back of my neck has stood up and I couldn't tell you why. And I can tell you a lot of people have felt that before. Your brain is picking something up that you can't articulate. Pay attention to that. Respect that. Now let's go back. I said effective aggression is one style. You get to see it. If you see their right foot drop, most right-handers, what does that mean?
They're bracing for a shot.
Yeah, there's a swing and it comes shortly. You'll see them dry their hands subconsciously, especially through the hair. If you see this, they're putting their hands on you. If they dry their hands, they're about to put them on you. And they're not doing it consciously. It's a subconscious act. So be aware of those motions. And I've watched thousands of assault videos against police officers because that's what I was in charge of, all officer safety for the state control. And you'll see that right foot drop. You'll see the Ichiro. I mean, it's literally that. Hike up that collar. Roll up that cuff. Set the paperwork or whatever it is they have in their hands down. I can remember having a drunk up on Snoqualmie Pass. He was very drunk, so he was easy to read. And I'm talking to him, and I watched his right foot drop. And I watched him do this. And I moved over to here. And he's looking at me, and he squares back up, and his right foot drops, and I moved over to here. I did that about 4 times until finally he's just like, forget it. I handcuffed him and off and went to jail. It was just real easy. But if you're paying attention, you can see these things happen. Facial expressions. Language or speech pattern will give you indications if they're repeating themselves. Now let me get into a little piece on prey versus predator mindset for you. I've done research on this. If you watch animals, you get a bunch of dogs around, you'll see it. I saw it this morning, dogs walking. And if there's dogs approaching each other, and they're not real sure, and the one's more aggressive, the other will stop and kind of reevaluate what's going on. Am I getting attacked? There's a shift between who's prey and who's predator in there. I've dealt with it a lot of times over the 37 years in law enforcement, that I'm going to arrest somebody and all of a sudden they think they want to fight. They think they're the predator and I'm the prey. Now I know that this is going to sound weird, but in order to keep people from being injured, myself included, I have to respond very aggressively at the lowest level possible so nobody gets hurt. Because if I allow that person to be the predator and be aggressive against the law enforcement, now it escalates and they pull out a knife or they break free and get to their car and I got to shoot them. And I know an officer who got shot 7 times because she was not aggressive enough when she told him he was under arrest and he pushed her away. He got to the car, got his gun, and she shot him 7 times and he was shot and killed later. Whereas if it would have been dealt with at the lowest level right as soon as he started to get aggressive. But we have this mindset of we don't want to hurt anybody, and you don't. But you have to change the dynamic of prey and predator. Because if you answer to aggression very quickly, it changes 99% of the people's responses. And please don't take me wrong. I'm not saying to be violent as police officers. I've had very few uses of force in my 37 years. Very few. But it has to do with how you pay attention, how you treat people. That's the #1 thing you can do to prevent yourself from being hurt. Pay attention and treat people well. It might sound strange. Looking sharp, being fit is another piece. The FBI did a study and they interviewed, I don't remember how many people there were, maybe 10 to 20 people that were in prison for assaulting police officers. And they tried to find out what was the common thread that made you attack a police officer. Most of them were like, well, I was just going to attack a police officer if the situation came about. And then they said, well, what would make you not attack a police officer? Strangely enough, they looked for dust on the gun. It was a common thing. Had the officer even drawn their gun lately? Is there food particles over there? Were they fat? Were they in shape? Were they sharp? Was their uniform crisp and clean? Was their brass shine? All of that made a difference as to whether they felt like they wanted to attack this person. When I was with the State Patrol, we actually did a little study at the Capitol campus. The troopers up there are trained on bicycle patrols, and they wear shorts, t-shirt, bicycle helmet. Next day, they'll wear the full trooper uniform with the campaign hat, the bow tie, and the whole bit, and they're contacting the same people for the same violations. They were 3 times as likely to get into a use of force when they were wearing their bicycle outfit. 3 times as likely with the same people over the same violations. Why? How you look, how you present yourself. If you're paying attention, it's less likely you're going to become a victim. I don't know where this story came from. I don't know if it's real. I don't know the person who did it, but I'm going to relay it because it gets across what I'd like to get across. The way the story goes is that this older woman whose children now have moved out of the house, she decided to go back and get her nursing degree, and she's now working at a hospital, and she has to work the graveyard shift, and she works in the city. She's standing at a bus stop early in the morning. She sees some juveniles coming towards her who look like gang members, look like they're planning something, and she's by herself at a bus stop. She thinks to herself, what do I do? What do I do? How am I going to deal with this? I'm feeling threatened. She then, at that point, as they get closer, she looks over, she figures out who looks like the leader, and she says, don't I know your mother? Pay attention, engage, make eye contact, don't be a victim. Very rarely will people who are looking to rob somebody on the street pick the biggest, baddest, meanest person they can find. Very rarely. Just like the predators on the Sahara Desert, right? They're going to pick a sick animal to attack, even though they could take out the big water buffalo. It's a little more dangerous. They're going to go for economy of effort. Make eye contact with people, engage with people, talk with them. Now, you tell me, what do people want? What does human nature want? What does everybody want, whether they are under the influence, whether they're mentally ill, whether they're in crisis, or anything else? What do people want?
Recognition.
Okay? They want to be heard. If you're cutting them off, you're going to agitate them. Listen to them. Be a good listener. What else do they want? They want to be respected. It doesn't matter who it is. This is in the prisons. It doesn't matter what scope of human being this is. They want to be respected. How do you respect people? Okay, listening is, again, one of those big key things. Valuing them as a human being and what they need. These things will keep you out of trouble more than anything else. Because the likelihood of you being in an active threat is not near as high as you being in a verbal confrontation with somebody that may build up to a threat. Does that make sense? How are we doing? We're right into an hour. I'm going to give you a 5-minute break. You need to get some snacks, some water. Karin brought all this wonderful stuff. They brought all this stuff back here for you. Indulge, please. Go. All right, we'll kick it off. Thank you. Not everybody left, so it must be okay. Sometimes that's my measurement of if I'm doing all right. It's because I know that people bail. Old stuff I've already heard it 6 times, whatever it is. All right. Here's the takeaway. Everybody listen for a second. If you learn nothing else today, learn this. A fire extinguisher is your best home defense tool there is. Even a little one. What is a fire extinguisher designed to do? Steal the oxygen and cover the fire. If you're at home and somebody's breaking in, my daughters took fire extinguishers with them to their dorms in college.
Good idea.
Why? Somebody comes in, you spray them, they can't breathe, they can't see, you can use them to beat them, or you can run away, and if it's your buddy who was drunk and coming in the middle of the night, they'll be okay. I have fire extinguishers near the front door, I have a fire extinguisher down in the patio, I have a fire extinguisher in the garage.
Well, that's good.
And if I have a fire, I'm ready. So one of the first things I do when I come into a building is I look where the fire extinguisher is. It also sprays the big ones. It'll get after it. It'll make a mess. So make sure you're good with it. Get me cleaning up. All right, give me some feedback. What do you got from the first hour that we've given to you? What has stood out to you? What have we told you so far? Give me some feedback. Be aware of your surroundings. Watch for body language. If you study body language, you will learn when it's abnormal. I'm a use of force expert. I have been for many years. I've testified for multiple counties and agencies all over Washington State, in court, in federal court. And one of the things that officers are trained is to know what normal looks like and what abnormal looks like. Because it'll jump out at you. When you contact thousands of people, you start to build a depository, or whatever you want to call it, of experience of what normal looks like, and what abnormal looks like, and when you're in danger. Now, I covered effective aggression. Now, the next is predatory aggression. Predatory aggression is completely void of emotion. You're not going to see a build-up. You're not going to see them get angry. They're just going to kill you because they're going to kill you. No emotion involved. That's the scariest type of aggression. Because there's usually some disconnect here. Because the average person cannot kill another person without some type of, you have to cross that boundary. Right? That's why people who cross the boundary in combat and come home and are not healthy, we pay even more attention to, because they've already crossed that boundary of taking lives. And most people do not. As a matter of fact, in Vietnam, the Army actually had to change its targets, because before Vietnam, the targets were square. They found out that a lot of the people in Vietnam were shooting, they wouldn't actually shoot a person. They couldn't bring themselves to shoot a person. So after Vietnam, the Army went to body silhouettes to desensitize the soldiers so that they could shoot targets that looked like people. And now all their targets look like people. It's the psychology of it. All right, so most people can't cross that boundary, and that's a good thing for us. If you see the effective aggression, you'll see it build, you'll see the anger, you'll see the frustration, you'll hear the escalation of adrenaline and everything else. But if it's predatory and they're very calm, that's scary. Now take a look back at some of the incidents that we've had. North Hollywood. I can't remember the Norco bank robbery. They had body armor and they were taking barbiturates or downers so that they could control their adrenaline. And they were very calm as they were shooting people and doing things. So they used drugs to assist in that process. When I just got back from the Western States, one of the sheriffs from the National Sheriff's Association went to Israel right after the attacks. And he toured the area where the attacks occurred. The Hamas put, I don't know if you know this, but they put GoPro cameras on and filmed themselves murdering, decapitating, raping, and everything else. And it was absolutely horrific. the thing that stood out to me was the portion that they attacked. There were no police, no law enforcement, and you weren't allowed to have firearms. So it was like a school shooting. There's nobody armed. Yeah, what's called a soft target. They had no resistance. That is a scary thing. That's one reason why the Second Amendment is so important to us as a country. During World War II, I've heard it said, I haven't picked up this quote, but I was told that the Emperor of Japan said, we will never attack continental United States because there's a gun behind every blade of grass. There's some truth to that.
When I was rafting in the Ukraine, being guided by former Soviet officers, they were convinced around the firearm that there's no way that anyone would attack the U.S. with troops because there's just too many guns.
And it's not because of the military or law enforcement necessarily. It's because the armed citizens, and I got to tell you, over the last 10 years specifically, I'm seeing more and more in the last 5 years in Washington State, more and more citizens who are hardworking, average Americans saying, wait a minute, I don't like the way things are going, I'm going to get involved. I'm seeing more people, the number of concealed pistol licenses that our office processes has increased over the last 5 years like you can't even believe. Yeah, absolutely. So just be aware of what we're out there, what we're dealing with. Let's talk a little bit about tactical communication. What does the word tactical mean? What would it imply? Okay, what's that? Well-trained or well-planned. Tactical means I planned something, I practiced it. So what would tactical communication look like? I have a beginning and an end. I have some thoughts. I've already rehearsed it. So let's talk a little bit about tactical communication. Over the years, like I said, if you work in the city as a police officer, you've got lots and lots of backup. You know, that little precincts, and if I get into a situation, there's a lot of people, I don't necessarily have to be all that courteous and kind because I got backup right there to help me. I worked on Snoqualmie Pass where my nearest backup was 2 hours away at times. I could not be an idiot. I could not be a jerk because I would get in trouble. And I really believe that's why I've had so few uses of force. It may be because I'm a little bit bigger and because I really love training. I've been in martial arts all my life, so I'm confident. Some of that comes across, but most of it is this. So how do you avoid conflict through communicating? We've already talked about it. What do most people want? Respect. They want to be heard and valued. Right? And most people want to belong to something. Who are the people they're often dealing with that are in crisis? We're seeing more mental health crisis than I've ever seen in my career. 37.
Lonely introverts.
What's that?
Lonely introverts.
Okay, some of them absolutely, because they're so isolated. COVID didn't help with that, did it? When I first started 37 years ago, I would run across a couple mental health crises. I ran across cocaine psychosis a few times. But other than that, it was very rare. Now, it's every day. Every single day we're dealing with mental crisis. Again, if you take time to listen, oftentimes you'll de-escalate the situation. Care about the person. Sometimes it's hard to do, especially if they're being rude or aggressive or violent. Give them the time of day. Value them as a human being. Try to help them. Those elements, right? Ask them what their name is. Why is that significant? Yeah, it personalizes. You are a human being. Tell me your name.
It allows them to belong.
Absolutely. What about somebody who's high? Does that work? I tell you, I've wrestled over 1,000 DUIs in my career. Both alcohol and drugs. It's very predictable behavior under certain alcohols or drugs. There's a few variations, but it's pretty predictable. And again, if if you listen to the person. You can use distraction techniques as well. I had an individual, I won't say his name, I still remember it to this day. I was up on Snoqualmie Pass, and he was a smoke jumper. You know what smoke jumpers are? In the middle of a fire, a forest fire, they parachute them in. They're like the craziest of all the firefighters in the world. So many of them die because they get parachuted in and they have to fight their way out. It's just wild. It takes a special breed of person. This kid, he was very, very drunk. And I stopped him in the middle of the day. And I watched that right foot drop back. And I said, hey, were you on the fire down in Arizona land? Oh, yeah, oh, yeah. Easy to distract. We did that 3 times during the night, where he was about to assault me, and all I did was distract him with something I knew he was passionate about. Pay attention to people. Pick up little cues that you can use that value them. They start to get angry. There's a lot of reasons people get angry. Maybe their life really sucks right now. Distract them. Try to keep them calm. Are there generational differences? Let me tell you an interesting thing. As a law enforcement trainer, I trained for 14 years at the State Patrol Academy, all the officer safety, that type of stuff, the fitness, the fighting. And I was also the TAC officer, so I was the drill sergeant of the State Patrol Academy. And I would get in their face and scream and yell at them because if they can't handle that stress, they're not going to handle somebody on the street who might actually want to hurt them. So they have to learn, we need to know whether they have the ability to handle that. So we put them under a lot of pressure and a lot of stress to see how they handle it. And I've forgotten where I'm going with that. Hang on just a second, I'll catch it. Oh, generational differences. Thank you. See all that gray hair? I think that's supposed to happen on a more often basis, as I hear from some people. But generational differences. I started noticing that the younger generations were not responding to body language as much as the previous generations. And I went, I wonder what that is. So I started looking into the research. The younger generations, the amount of screen time has prevented the portion of your brain that picks up body language from developing at the same rate that previous generations have. Unless you grew up in an abusive home and you were beaten or abused. Or like me, you had older brothers that beat the tar out of you. You learned that, I learned that this, when Mom did that, bad things were coming. But now, you do this, you may get arrested for abuse. I got into fights. I went to 13 different grade schools. Idaho, Montana, California, Arizona, and Washington. 13 grade schools. Guess what the new kid gets to do every time they come in, especially as a boy? Somebody's flicking my ears from behind, picking on you. I had to find the biggest bullet, and then I would fight them, and then we'd become friends, and I was all accepted. That was just the routine that happened. But how do you pick up on that? You just got to, again, I've lost track of where I'm going with this. I don't know.
That old timer's kicking in, boss.
What's that?
That old timer's kicking in.
I know. That's all right. I'll get it. Oh, that's what we're doing there. Okay.
From one generation to the next, there's a vast difference in how people read people.
Yes. Well, the other thing is I got into a lot of fights as a kid, so my subconscious learned body language quickly. I learned when I was about to be assaulted. My mom would slap me, my brother would beat me up. I learned those things. Now, in school, if you get into a fight, you're suspended. You're not allowed to fight. I got into fights, and I may have missed a recess. I still remember the first time I attacked a kid who was picking on somebody else, and it wasn't the first time I wasn't defending myself. I was defending somebody else, and I was in 5th grade. And what happened to me after I attacked, I told him, you're not picking on him anymore. He was a big kid. And he said, oh, really, what are you going to do about it? I drilled him. And what happened to me, I didn't go to recess. I didn't get suspended. Our society is very different now than it was before, was my point. We've changed as a society, and the ability to learn body language is not at the same rate as it used to be. Does that make sense? Because I found research that backed that up. And what I found as well is that the younger generations are more animated in their body language. Because to get it across, they have to be animated. Because the person that they're dealing with doesn't pick it up as fast. It's kind of like an interesting thing I read where Japan is actually reintroducing dangerous toys on the playgrounds for kids. Because the part of their brain that learns to recognize danger and avoid it is actually stunted in its growth. Because they don't have the merry-go-round where you get beaten tar out of you and thrown around. I mean, how many have been hurt on a merry-go-round when you're a kid? Exactly. Right, we've sterilized everything. And because we sterilized it, there's going to be a difference. So if you're of the younger generation, depending on how you grew up and whether you've been involved in martial arts and learned to read body language, be aware that you may not be able to read it as well as older generations, just because of the circumstances in which you grew up. Also, you need to be aware of your body language when you're talking to people. Because what does your body language come across as? Well, the way they say it is that communication is broken down to, I'm going to find that slide, only a small portion of what you communicate is your verbal words. What's the other portions of your communication?
Body language.
So 93% of communication is your delivery. Delivery. That includes voice tone, inflection, and body language. And if there's a discrepancy between your body language and your words, what is the person going to pick up on? The body language, the tone, the inflection. And I was a drill sergeant for many years at Fort Dix, Fort Benning, Fort Jackson, and Fort Sill as a reservist. And I don't even realize it sometimes when I get in, and this is what the military calls a knife hand. When this comes out, I'm upset. When I talk to people, and I sometimes don't even realize that I'm leaning in and I'll get right into that body language. I've had other people go, oh, don't do that. I'm like, oh, I didn't realize it. So you have to be aware of it. Have people that will give you honest feedback that you were saying this, but your body language was saying this. So be aware of that when you're communicating with somebody. What are some other threat signs? What would you expect to see from somebody that's going to attack you? How about profuse sweating? How about repeating themselves? How about that 1,000-yard stare? Does anybody know what that 1,000-yard stare is? It's like they're looking right through you. You're not even there. Yeah, and sometimes that's drugs, sometimes that's mental illness, sometimes that's about to attack you. The emotions are so strong. How about slower speech, profanity increasing, incomplete sentences? And the other thing is threats. Threats are something to pay attention to, sometimes more, sometimes less. I've been threatened a lot. Because when I arrest somebody, somehow I'm ruining their life based on their decisions. So they decide to, and most of the time they're under the influence of something, so they decide to threaten you verbally. Other ones don't threaten, they just attack you. Yes, sir?
With verbal threats, I mean, like, everyone's different, but you come across a lot of younger guys, and they'll make threats constantly, but you can't really tell when they mean it, but I mean, consistency and threats, and they're like not meaning it, but you're making a lot of threats. Well, how do you pick those people up? If threatening is kind of their communication style, what do you do with that?
got those people that are what we call blowhards. Right? They're going to bellow all of these threats and everything else because that's how they usually bully people. And then once they're met with somebody who's not impressed by it, sometimes they'll back down. But other times you're wrong. Right? And that's that effective aggression. You have to be able to sort through as to whether or not their threats are serious. I tell you, I take threats based off of what they're under the influence of very differently. There's certain drugs that I take their threats more serious than other drugs. Certain intoxication levels that I take more serious. But that's going to come with time. Here's a great tool. It's called a strip phrase. If somebody threatens you, or they're screaming at you, you can interrupt them and make them a better listener. Think about that for a second. How do you interrupt a person who's screaming at you and make them a better listener?
Ask them a clarifying question.
Yes, exactly. Are you saying this? It's one of the only times you can interrupt somebody without pissing them off. Why? You're trying to listen and make sure that you get straight what they're saying. And if they're threatening you, you might say, wow, what did I do? Or what's going on, man? Are you saying this? There are some techniques that you can try, but a strip phrase, next time you're in an argument with a family member, because we never argue with family members, try this. Try to ask a clarifying question about what they just said. Now, well, how does that make them a better listener? Because they're going to stop yelling and make sure you got it right when you repeat it back to them. It is a very effective tool in communicating. If you walk away, here's your second walk away with. As your pride goes up, your ability to communicate goes down. The more pissed or your hot buttons have been pushed, the more likely you're going to get assaulted or in a fight. Empathy diffuses aggression. Put yourself in their shoes, try to understand, listen, feed information back to them. It's going to, like a sponge, diffuse things. I'll tell you a quick story. I was over in Eastern Washington, and some of you know where Thorpe is, where the fruit mall is. We used to work with the aircraft there, State Patrol aircraft, and they have the marks on the freeway. You guys know how that works? Every quarter of a mile, they got marks, and they're up in the airplane, and as soon as you hit the first mark, they're hitting their stopwatch. As soon as you hit the second one, and it calculates a new speed. It's just a time and distance formula. So they know how fast you're going. And we were working an emphasis. So we worked 10 days. I wrote 25 tickets a day for 10 days straight, and most of them were over 90 miles an hour. A couple of them were over 100 miles an hour. Anyway, my good buddies in front of me, they got 6 or 7 patrol cars on that ramp chasing people and turning around and chasing people all day long. It doesn't seem to make much of a difference, but we do it anyway. And I can see my buddy up there, and I've known him because we went through the academy together. We were all through training together, and I can see his ears starting to get red. He's got this lady from California screaming in his face. Just screaming. I can see the spit because he's in front of his car, up by her car, and I have another car and my car, and I can still see what's going on. And then I finish my stop, this car pulls out, I walk up there, I tap my buddy on the shoulder. He doesn't even say anything. He turns and walks back to his car, and I take his place. I don't think she noticed that we moved. Now, why did he do that? Because I knew his hot buttons had been pushed. And if his hot buttons have been pushed, his ability to communicate has diminished greatly. So you must know your hot buttons, and if you're in a workplace or at home, you need to have the people around you know your hot buttons, because they need to rescue you if your hot buttons are pushed. Is this making sense? So I'm talking to this lady. I'm not emotionally involved with this lady. She hasn't been screaming at me for 5 minutes, so I'm not upset. And I just start talking real gentle with her. And all of a sudden, you just watch her. Her tone comes down, and she's trying to hear what I'm saying, but I'm not screaming at her. Finally, the whole conversation calms down. By the time we're done, she's apologized. She's upset about 17 other things, and this just happened to be the thing that set her off. But if I would have raised her tone, if I would have left my body up there who had already now become upset, more than likely it would have had a different ending. So, do you know your hot buttons? What are some of your guys' hot buttons? What's going to make you mad? Yes?
When somebody calls me a little girl or a receptionist.
Oh, there you go. Everybody take note.
What was it?
If somebody calls me a little girl or a receptionist. Oh, no, you didn't. Right? So you immediately get that flash of adrenaline and anger. For me, it's following too close. If somebody's on my bumper and I can't read their license plate, I get angry right away. I learn to control it better because I can actually do something about it. I feel sorry for him anymore. I know. Being in a hurry all the time is terrible. It's terrible. I feel sorry for him. But what other hot buttons do you have? How about if somebody, you're in an argument with your spouse and they tell you to calm down? How does that work? Not so advised. How about if somebody says to you when you're in an argument, you wouldn't understand? What does that insinuate? That you're stupid. So how do you think that works? There are things that you want to avoid when you're communicating. Again, what's the way you can interrupt a person? Ask for clarifying questions. It makes them a better listener. Do not allow your ego to get involved. If your ego is involved, tap out. Say, hey, you know what? I'm going to need a minute. We'll talk later. Because if you keep going down that trail, we often say things we don't mean. We get hurtful. All the other things. I got to tell you that when I started learning some of these things and I'd take them home, it made my relationship with my wife better too. Because communication is a big thing with the spouse. And do you think we know each other's hot buttons? And you think we might just push them because? We would never do that, would we? Hey, whether you guys realize it or not, we're all self-centered and selfish and look out for our own interests before everybody else, and we need to work on that. Right? And if you think that you're not self-centered or selfish, you probably got a few things to learn. Right? I love it when the psychologists say that people are generally good. I'm like, do you have children? What is the first thing that your child learns to say? No. No, and mine. What do you mean you're not selfish or self-centered? That was the first words out of your mouth. I'm all right, yeah, I get it. There's a lot of things involved in it, but that's just one simple observation, is that we all are selfish and self-centered, and I think we can learn to be better. But we have to understand that about somebody else, especially if their life is going to pieces. So if somebody's doing a shooting or an active threat, do you think everything's going pretty good for them? No. Take a look and research. And do you guys know that before Columbine, the largest school shooting was right here in Washington State? In Moses Lake.
Moses Lake, interesting.
Before Columbine. It's been a long time, yes. This is why we pay attention to people around us, especially at work. A lot of the aggressiveness happens at work. Workplace violence because of spousal relationships, because of other things where somebody comes in and has workplace violence. That is a real issue to us as well. So paying attention to your coworkers. During COVID, there was an 85, the last numbers I heard, please don't quote me on it, but I believe it was 85% reduction in DCYU complaints for child abuse. During COVID, reduction. Why? Because they weren't in school and the teachers weren't seeing them. And the teachers who know the kids go, what's wrong, buddy? is not your normal behavior. Something's going on. When we stay engaged with our society and our community, and somebody's in crisis, we all have an obligation to help them, to prevent them from going to the places that they will go if they're in isolation, like you said. So, communicating, it basically comes back again to caring for people and intervening when we need to. Make phone calls. Our society has a system, sometimes it's broken, and we know that, and hopefully we're all getting involved. Hopefully we're getting things to change. I know that there were, 6 initiatives this last legislative session that was led by citizens, not by legislators. What does that mean? It means the citizens are standing up and saying, wait a minute, you're not necessarily representing our best interests. We would like to have these things taken care of as well. And that's important. People are frustrated right now because of lots of things. Mental health isn't all that great. We say that we are connected. And that's what excites me about, as I travel around the entire county of Mason County, more and more people are getting back involved in community groups. They're interacting face to face. They are hungry for it after COVID and the isolation and some of the things that are going on. I'm seeing more community involvement. Right now we've had an interesting situation with the fire district down in Matlock. That community is coming together very well because of a crisis that's going on. And they're getting to know each other better than they got to know each other if there wasn't a crisis. They're getting involved. So the more we as a society get involved with those around us, the less this is going to happen, is my thoughts and beliefs. I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a doctor, but I believe the more we pay attention to people, the more we're going to pick up on those cues long before they happen. So it's not our job, it's all of our job. Does that make sense? Okay, another thing, workplace. If you're concerned about your workplace, there's some things you can do to make your workplace more safe. Where are your escape routes? Do you have escape route? If somebody were to come into the building shooting or with an edged weapon, what are your escape routes? You need to play the what if game without it being paranoia. You need to rehearse in your head, if somebody were to come in, what are my options? Where is my fire extinguisher? Is it close to me? Do I have cover or concealment? What's the difference? Cover blocks view, concealment blocks view, cover blocks bullets. So if somebody came in spraying a big gun and I ducked down, is this thing even going to stop bullets? Doing an assessment of where you work or at your home and what your escape routes are is very important because it starts to store it in that different part of your brain that I talked about. If you're going to use pepper spray, let's talk about weapons that you carry. Where are the vents in your house? Does the vent blow right by your door back at your face? That would be what we call a clue. Same with the fire extinguisher. What about at work? Where are the vents? Where are the doors? Are there trip hazards? How do I get out? Do we have a code word amongst our workers that I'm reaching my point of no longer being an effective communicator so that they can take over, or do we pay attention to each other enough to know when the ears are red or whatever it is? And you have a code word. Hey, you got a phone call. That's what we used to do as drill sergeants. If you started getting angry, the other drill sergeant would come up and say, hey, you got a phone call. And they'd tap you out, you go. And the written rule for us was, if somebody did that to you, you had to step out regardless of how engaged you were in the situation. And we agreed on that beforehand to prevent you from stepping too far. What is your safety plans at work? What about a bomb? What about an earthquake? These are threats as well. Now, let me hit the gun thing. I'm sure there's people in here who carry. I want you to understand, if there was an active shooter in here, and the PD came a-running, just because you're a good guy doesn't mean we know it. What do you have if you're carrying a gun and you've got the gun out? You've now become our threat, as far as we're concerned, because we don't know. But I'm the good guy. Well, you've got nothing on that says you're the good guy. This is a real problem for off-duty cops. Because we wear a uniform so much, we assume everybody knows that we're the good guy. And we've had off-duty cops shooting, or real cops shooting off-duty cops in situations across the United States. Because they assume, oh, you know who I am. No, I don't. So if you carry and you are going to do something, be aware as soon as law enforcement gets there, put the gun down, be very compliant, because the officers are coming in full of adrenaline, not knowing what's going on, trying to assess, and all they see is somebody with a gun, and if you're stupid, you may get shot. I hope that makes sense to you. Be aware of that. The next thing, I'm going to tell you a little secret that a lot of people don't know. But even very trained people in crisis, a lot of people get shot. I'll give you an example. State Patrol, we had a drill where we took officers, experienced officers, and put them 21 feet apart in a circle. And they had all their gear on and they had simunitions. And the simunitions comes out really hard and fast. It'll rip your skin off. And I mean, it hurts, it bruises too, so they had a couple on, and neck protection and eye protection. But it's going to hurt. And you're going to get zinged real good. So there's that pressure of pain. 21 feet apart, they each get 3 bullets, their guns are in their holster, and we blow the whistle, and they have to stay in their circle and shoot each other. While the other one's trying to shoot down. What do you think the hit ratio was of 1,000 officers who went through this? 1 out of 3 bullets hit the other person. That's the reality of chaos. I don't care what people tell you, well, I'm trained and I do this. These are trained, experienced officers who've been involved in lots of things. But when you introduce pain or threat of death, it changes how you respond. So if you think that in a crowd, you're going to be able to pick out the bad guy and shoot him, you may be right. But guess what? You don't know little Johnny's running right in front of you because you get what's called tunnel vision. When you're in crisis, your body takes the blood and sends it to your internal organs. So that if you receive a cut, you don't bleed out as fast. It's a survival mechanism. You get what's called auditory occlusion. You don't hear much. You get peripheral vision cut out, and you get tunnel vision. So if you, carrying a gun, in a big crisis, think that you're going to be able to shoot the bad guy, you might be right, but you may not see 3 people that jump in front of you and get the bullet first. And are you prepared to live with that? I watched it happen with trained, experienced officers who wear a gun every day and train all the time. So what do you think the reality is with the civilian who goes out and shoots at the range once a week? Or one thing or another? I don't know. Just be aware of that. That's why I say fire extinguishers are a way better way to go. Because you spray everybody in the room and it's okay. What are your questions? I think I've hit most of them. Oh, how about rights? Washington State is not a capital or a what's called a castle doctrine state. It means you cannot shoot somebody to protect property. You can only shoot somebody if you feel that your life or somebody else's life is in immediate danger.
Well, if you're coming into your house, don't you feel like that's immediate danger?
There is a dual standard for law enforcement and civilians. Because of my training, I have to give them commands and do all that type of stuff, depending on the level of threat. Whereas somebody who doesn't have training and you're by yourself and somebody's breaking in, if you can articulate you felt your life was in danger, you can use a lethal force against that individual. But you have to be able to explain that you feel your life is in immediate danger. You can't shoot somebody because they're stealing your property. Different states you can, you cannot in Washington. That's called the castle doctrine. Okay, so it boils down to immediate threat of life, then you can use lethal force. Everybody understand?
So they break in your house and all they're doing is stealing your stuff or trying to kill you.
It has to do with your perception.
I know my perception, that means I don't myself.
Well, I can tell you, I'll hand the shotgun to my wife. Why? It's a different standard than for me.
She just dropped it because she doesn't want to touch it.
No. No, my wife doesn't. She's not afraid of guns. She carries it. Yes?
I still have a dilemma. You say if something's happening and something escalates, how do you know, do you get involved to help them? Or say somebody's stabbing somebody and there's this crowd around. How do you run to help or do you run to get away? And that's
You know, this is like,
I mean, obviously.
do you guys remember what happened up in Marysville at the Pilchuck school shooting? Some teachers got engaged, got involved to try to help, some of the different things that were going on. I can tell you, you probably don't know how you're going to react until you're there. Some of you are going to run into danger because that's the way you were made. Some of you are going to move away from danger because it's a reaction. And until you're in that situation, you may not know how you're going to react. But understand, it's not shameful for self-preservation and then reevaluating, because if there is response and you can call 911 and tell people what's going on, that's going to be extremely helpful as well. When I have people ride with me in my patrol car, I tell them, pay attention to where we are at, because if I go to something and I get shot, I don't want you to try to come up and save me. I want you to drive away and tell everybody else where I'm at. That's more important to me. So there's not a real answer. I know that I would engage. If somebody had a knife, I'd be grabbing a chair. I'd be grabbing something else. A knife, you need distance from. I carry my keys in the civilian world. I carry keys on a lanyard, Shelton High School lanyard. Why do I do that? Because keys can rip right across their eyes without them getting close enough to stab me if they've got a knife. Right? Throw something. If you have that water bottle, chuck it in their face. What happens when you throw something in somebody's face? Their hands come up. And if they got a gun, that means they're now pointing at you. It's instinctive. Yes, you got a question?
Would you engage because of the level of training and that maybe like suggest we shouldn't engage because of the level of training, or would that be a...
I've seen people with a lot of training who don't engage because they pull out and they assess the situation a little different. I've seen people with very little training engage. I'm just saying, until you're there, don't judge yourself too harshly one way or the other. But in that crisis, you will know what to do. Or you won't. And I hate to say it that way, but I've been in that situation many times, and I know there's some former law enforcement and military, and they know exactly what I'm talking about. Until you're in that situation, it's very hard to say, oh, this is what you should do.
Well, should is something you can't show it yourself.
And again, it's going to depend on whether getting help is more important than stopping. But I tell you, right now, if more citizens got involved in situations, less things would be happening. And I've always heard, especially cities, tell people, don't get involved. We don't have that luxury. If you're in Hoodsport and somebody's attacking you, it's going to be a while before we get there. You're going to have to deal with it, unless we just happen to be here. So I'm saying less and less don't get engaged. I'm not promoting vigilantes, hear me. That's not what I'm promoting. I'm just saying citizens need to be involved because the police are the people and the people are the police. That's the basic premise of policing by consent. Because if you didn't want law enforcement to police you, we wouldn't be able to.
Thank you.
Hang on, she get hands up first. Yes?
Hey, do we have gangs that we should be aware of?
Question is, do we have gangs? Yes, we do.
We do?
We do.
What kind of gangs do we have?
We just remember, we are surrounded by 1.3 million people in Thurston, Pierce, and Kitsap County. And they are a short 20 or less minute drive here So any of the problems they have, we have. That's the reality anymore.
What should we be looking for as far as that goes? My question was going to be, what do we know about, we don't have any information on all of these millions of people across our border illegally. Like, I've always thought we're so far away from the south.
I've always thought that too.
Yeah, that we're worried about it. We've got to watch the border here. I just have to come from a different direction, so.
Now, the number one that's coming from Canada across the blame section is from India and Pakistan. They're coming into Canada on visas, and then they come across the border illegally. That's what the Border Patrol director of that region has said.
Still the adult bills?
Yes.
So.
If you see something suspicious, report it. Pay attention to your community. Know what normal is. If something's outside of normal and looks suspicious, call it in. Even if we don't do anything, we start to build a log and start to build patterns.
Okay,
Very important for us. Yes?
I have a question about that because our neighborhood has changed, really changed. We have a lot of people from south of the border that we never had before. And I'm here to tell you, their behavior is not like neighbors I've had in the past.
There's cultural differences, absolutely.
Well, it's not only cultural, it's other things. I saw illegal stuff going on at a house across the street for 2 years. And I called it in and called it in, and like you say, you can't be everywhere. So I stopped calling it in.
Oh, don't do that.
But I didn't know that you kept a log.
Yes, it's in the computers. Now, here, I'll give you an example. Mike Purvis used to own the IGA in Hoodsport. And Mike was getting people shoplifting almost every single day at the IGA in Hoodsport. And I'd go out and talk to Mike, and he'd say, I don't even call it in because I know you guys are too far away. And I said, Mike, how am I supposed to get the numbers to take to the county commissioners so that I can get more officers unless you report what's actually happening so that I have the data, it's all data driven, and I can take that data to ask for more officers and prove the need.
I did not know that, not at all.
Well, I'm glad you brought it up because I do try to emphasize that. Even if we can't respond, please call it in because those patterns are very important to us because our deployment of our officers, if they have discretionary time and they're not responding to real-time emergencies, are based off of data on crimes. So if an area's got problems, keep calling it in. Now remember, for 2 years, the use of drugs was effectively legal in Washington State. It was so complicated for us to be able to charge until the Blake fix came about, and now fentanyl is not a felony, it's a misdemeanor. All of them, there are no felony unless it's intent to deliver, possession with intent to deliver. So Washington State, those people that are using drugs, it's very hard for us, if it's a house where they're just using, it's hard for us to do anything with it because the amount of resources. Now before, when it was a felony, there was a little bit more effort with it. We don't even have drug sniffing dogs now because to write a search warrant, it's not worth it with the misdemeanor many times unless it's possession with intent to deliver. And then it's a felony, then we have all the extra resources. So just be patient, keep after it. It happens all over the community, and it's very unfortunate.
About 2 months ago, we have an empty lot across the street. It's been empty forever. About 2 months ago, a car came in and just sat there. And I kept looking at it and thinking, why is that car there? Why is that car there? And then about a week after that, another van came in from Portland, Oregon. They pulled all the seats out of the original van and were pulling packages out of the original van and transferring them.
That sounds suspicious.
Yeah, and I called it in, I never saw any response. And I thought, oh well, but you say it is reported, it is.
Yeah, when you call it into the non-emergency line to MACECOM or the emergency line, it generates a case number. And it's associated with addresses or names, and then it starts to build a log.
Packages of who knows what, guns, drugs, money.
Yeah.
They took the seats all apart, had them all over the ground and putting packages into the van next to it.
Yep, keep calling it in. Please be patient. Let's see if we hit all of these.
mostly these threats.
The only one you didn't cover was the parents for active threats.
Oh, yeah.
Parents what?
Parents, if somebody is in the school, one of your children in the school, and you hear of an active shooter, first of all, understand that there was the swatting calls that was coming around. Now, I've heard from multiple people that oftentimes is a tactic to see what kind of response the local community will come up with if somebody is planning something, or it's just harassment, right? A little bit of both. If you're a parent or a grandparent, talk it through with your kids. Have a plan in place. Text me this, and I know you're okay. All I need to know is you're okay. I don't know if you guys remember when I don't remember the name of the bridge in San Francisco in 1989 collapsed with a big earthquake. It was, the Bay Bridge collapsed and all that. What did the fire chief, I mean, it was a huge earthquake down there. It was like 6, 7 or 7 months. I don't remember what it was. But what did the fire chief do before his people responded? The fire chief sent every firefighter, if they couldn't get a hold of their family, to their house to make sure their kids and family was okay. Why did the fire chief do that? Because he knew that they were going to probably work for the next 72 hours straight, and they wouldn't be any good to anybody if they didn't know if their family was okay. Okay, so that's just smart leadership. Have a plan in place with your kids or grandkids. Most people have phones. The phone lines will actually become overwhelmed. When we had that, what we believe was a shooting at Hawkins Middle School, you couldn't get out on your phones up in Belfair. It was just overwhelmed. But have a plan, a text, something that you know best you can, and then if not, you just have to go to the law enforcement agency that's in charge of the response and look for updates there. Don't necessarily go to the school, because the law enforcement agency is responsible for the initial response. Once it's secure, then the school will be the one. Am I correct in saying what your guys' understanding is as well? The initial response is ours. The threat, the crime, as soon as it calms down, then it'll go back to the school. So look to the social media of law enforcement first. Because that was the first thing we did, is set up an incident command PIO, and we had a press conference up in Belfair. Because we had to. We didn't need to at the one in Shelton, because it was done in less than 30 minutes, I think. It was fairly quick. And I got to tell you, when that call came in, with shots being fired to Macecon, and they thought it was real, it was less than 3 minutes, and the first officers were on scene going. Less than 3 minutes. Did we hit all the rest of them? Well, you guys were fantastic. Now I need your feedback. We haven't given this class too many times to just the general citizens. What is good? What isn't? What is too much? Because I'm a cop. I've been involved in law enforcement for my whole life. Am I emphasizing things too much?
None of it's too much. None of it's too much.
What do we need?
I think every citizen of this county should be here. That's what I feel, because we went around it, you know.
So maybe do it again.
Yes,
girl. The main thing you can have all the plans in the world. And said when the first shot fired, the plans go out the window. And they do.
But you can go back to them.
But if you have them, and the key to it is practice. Practice. Jump under the table. Did all that sort of thing. It became the Navy training people. They train, they respond because of training to kill. And that's what we need to practice.
Yes. And I can tell you, I know when my son was at the high school, and the high school was locked down. This was like 2006. It was locked down because of somebody that done a robbery in the strip mall across the way, and they thought he had a weapon and he was coming across. At that point, the schools were teaching everybody to hide under the desk and be a victim. I wouldn't let my son do that, because I said, do you understand what happened at Virginia Tech? The largest one. The guy actually put targets on the ground and practiced shooting students under the desks because he knew that they would hide under the desks like little victims, because that's what our schools were teaching at that time. My son grabbed a fire extinguisher and 2 other football players, and they stood by the door. The teacher screamed at us and said, "Don't worry, we'll take care of it." It's run if you can. Get out. If you can't run, hide. But you damn well be ready to fight. Not lie down and let somebody victimize you. When we had that Hawkins Middle School, the home ec teacher, I got to talk to her later, she armed all of her kids with forks and knives. And said, if the person comes in our door, we're going to attack them like little crazies. And I'm like, good for you. You would save lives if you do that, as opposed to hiding under a desk. I understand the noise you don't want to make because you don't want to draw attention in the hide phase. But if it's fight time, that's where that prey-predator mindset needs to be switched. And you need to let whoever this is that's attacking you know that you're going to get a piece of it even if they shoot you. Okay, anything else? Yes?
Just for future, I'd like to see more of these going on.
Yeah.
Regularly, maybe.
But it'd be the same people that come back.
My thought process, this is at 3 o'clock, so we have a lot of people. I'm sorry.
I'm rubbing in that he's retired.
Yeah. Go back out and talk to our friends and public, and just that you should have been there, you should have been there. So if you have another one.
Well, we'll definitely do it, that's for sure.
Maybe a little later in the day.
Yeah.
Sometime 6 o'clock or something.
Talk to Karin and Kevin Schulte with the EDC or others, and we'll do more. Because it's our community, and it's our community safe.
Your message, is that what you
No, I will do. If you organize it, I'll come and teach Floyd. I just think they organize this. I want to give Kevin credit.
Okay, I'll talk to them.
All right, we're at the time. I'm going to stick around and answer questions. Thank you so much.